In Australia, over 40,000 men and women are currently behind bars. They've shattered countless lives, destroyed families. Some have been responsible for unspeakable violence.
There are just some people that are just evil of heart.
She's just scary. She's just real scary.
Some people are born with just that evil gene.
If you think you've seen and heard it all, you haven't. The truth of life behind bars in some of Australia's highest security prisons, told by the people who know.
It's dangerous on a daily basis. It's life-threatening.
Stabbings, hangings, people getting their heads stomped on.
If I was dangerous when I went in, I was more dangerous when I came out.
In this episode, the gangster's mole turned prison top dog.
She was mean, she was vain, she was greedy, she was spiteful.
And the brutal reality of life in prison for sex offenders.
You will get stabbed, bashed, possibly killed if they can, but yeah, you're gonna get brutalized, you're gonna get destroyed. Especially if they know you won't survive 1 hour. That's fact.
Plus a vintage insight into jail life, when homebrew was everywhere and lethal.
And I think I'd put the paint stripper firm out of business. Yeah. Oh, it just strips the lining out of your guts.
And meet the criminals behind a road trip that ended in a double murder.
So he produces a knife, he tells Beckett to get out a knife as well, and in an instant, these girls are on a path to their deaths. Among the thousands of prisoners locked up around the country, this one ranks among the worst of the worst. His name is Leslie Camilleri. Leslie Camilleri is the monster under the bed that parents tell their kids doesn't exist. What he did to teenagers Lauren Barry and Nicole Collins in 1997 was truly monstrous. They were picked up by the side of the road and raped over and over and over again. The girls asked, "You're going to kill us, aren't you?" And they did. These days, Camilleri is serving multiple life sentences in Victoria's Barwon prison. Like all child rapists, he's a marked man inside jail, because even hardened criminals have morals. Former correctional officer Ash Langsworth knows exactly what Camilleri's life is like inside.
Les, no, definitely not popular. Even at the unit he was initially in at Barwon, he soon became alienated and Les got moved to Greville unit where he ultimately got severely assaulted. He's a very strange character. He's very tall, gangly, goofy looking, overweight, very strange. He keeps to himself, but then when he wants something he'll come up and have a conversation with the staff.
The story of one of Australia's most dangerous prisoners starts on the harsh streets of King's Cross in the early 1980s. Back then, it was a haven for drugs, prostitution and crime. Leslie Camilleri as a child was as abandoned as somebody can get. He was kicked to the curb by his parents for a couple of years from around the age of 10, and he was living in King's Cross off his own smarts, and really that meant stealing, thieving and hanging on to a whole deal of anger against everyone in his world. This is a little boy who should have been pitied. But then you see what he went on to do, who he became, and how he affected so many other families as well. It's when you look at all of that, you lose all sense of pity for the man. Lauren and Nicole's upbringing couldn't have been more different. They grew up in loving families on the peaceful New South Wales south coast, the last place you'd expect to come across a monster like Camilleri.
Lauren Barry was about to turn 15. She and her bestie Nicole Collins had joined a group of others as they were about to go camping. This is a town of a few hundred people, a totally safe haven, or so they thought. Their parents certainly thought nothing of it at all.
On the 3rd of October 1997, Lauren and Nicole left their friends to head to a party. Along the way, they encountered Leslie Camilleri and his friend Lindsay Beckett.
He invited them into the car to have a bit of fun and go for a bit of a drive. They did. It was the worst decision they ever made.
Their journey started innocently enough.
Camilleri suggests going to a concert that he'd heard about in Bega. Everything is fine, they're safe.
But before long, they realised they were in terrible danger.
The undercarriage of the car at one point hits the road, and for somebody with a hair-trigger rage like Leslie Camilleri, it sets him off. He becomes furious. He's hopped up on amphetamines. He pulls out a knife. He tells Beckett also to get out a knife, and in an instant, these girls are on a path to their deaths.
What followed was a prolonged, drug-fueled nightmare as the men drove their teenage captives on and on across the border into Victoria.
They would inject themselves with amphetamines. They'd stop to do that, rape the girls, and then continue on with their journey until perhaps their energy was running out. Then they'd stop again, inject themselves again with amphetamine, rape the girls, and continue. And so it went until the girls were killed.
The journey ended several hundred kilometres and 12 hours after it began. Lauren and Nicole were taken to a creek in remote bushland, and Camilleri ordered Beckett to murder the girls.
When the girls don't come home, then it sparks a search for them. There are national headlines, and it becomes apparent once the girls' clothing was discovered not far away that something bad had happened to them.
As days stretched into weeks, Nicole and Lauren's families held on to the hope that the girls were still alive.
I know that they haven't run away. My sister wouldn't do a thing like that.
Only Leslie Camilleri and Lindsay Beckett knew the girls lay dead hundreds of kilometres away. Camilleri wasn't going to spill, and he was confident Beckett wouldn't either.
I mean, this is all about power. He had power over the girls, but he also had power over Lindsay Beckett, his weaker but still very willing co-participant in this absolutely heinous crime. Camilleri would not have dreamt that his mate Beckett would give evidence against him, which of course is exactly what he did.
Police got their lucky break when they found a car that Beckett had stolen. They quickly suspected he was involved in the girls' disappearance.
Police worked with the younger, weaker one of the pairing, and he confessed. He got significantly less jail time than Camilleri did because of that participation and cooperation in the investigation.
There are many things you could say about Beckett. He has a notably low IQ. But at least he admitted to what he did and helped police locate the girls' bodies and the murder weapon.
Beckett pleaded guilty to the murders, the Crown relying on his story of how he and Leslie Camilleri picked up the girls near their Bega home.
Camilleri, on the other hand, tried to pin the murders on Beckett. A jury didn't buy it, and he received a life sentence.
The parents of the murdered girls couldn't hide their relief, the two mothers screaming yes in unison as the guilty verdict was read.
They were the best words I'd heard in this long, long trial.
Coming up on Australia's most dangerous prisoners, Camilleri's shocking prison confession.
What the world didn't know, but he knew, is that he was successful at this. He had done it before.
The prolonged rape and murder of teenagers Lauren Barry and Nicole Collins in 1997 was beyond monstrous. But even monsters can develop a conscience. Their murder was only solved because Lindsay Beckett confessed. His accomplice, Leslie Camilleri, has no conscience to speak of.
Camilleri yawned in the dock and was still yawning as he was led out of court. Asked if he had anything to say before sentence was passed, he said simply no.
I believe that Lindsay may have come to terms with what he did and be remorseful. With Les, not a chance.
Nobody knew it when Leslie Camilleri was sentenced, but unlike Beckett, he'd murdered before.
Leslie Camilleri was now synonymous with among the worst handful of murders Australia's ever documented. What the world didn't know, but he knew, is that he had raped and murdered a 13-year-old girl 5 years earlier. Her body hadn't been found. Her name was Prue Bird.
She disappeared from her home on a Sunday afternoon in 1992.
A freshly prepared meal was left untouched on the dining room table. There were no signs of forced entry.
Please help me. I need you out there to help me find my child.
Leslie Camilleri confesses to Prue Bird's murder 21 years after her disappearance. At the subsequent murder trial, the judge urged Camilleri to exercise his conscience and reveal where he dumped her body. He refused.
I think he's gutless. It's 2 years. He's a nobody.
Camilleri had another 28 years added to his sentence. He'll take the truth of what he did to Prue to the grave.
I believe Les is where he should be. He is dangerous and will always be dangerous. So he should never see the light of day.
Camilleri is kept with other child sex offenders in a protected unit of Barwon Prison.
If you go into jail and you're a rapist and you go into an area or a wing with guys who are not rapists, you will most likely get stabbed, bashed, possibly killed if they can. But yeah, you're going to get brutalized. You're going to get destroyed. You will not, especially if they know, you won't survive 1 hour.
Despite being in a protected wing, Camilleri has been severely bashed.
He got hit over the head with a frozen bottle of water, what they call as an ice brick, and it made a fairly good mess of him. I believe he died once or twice and got revived by the ambulance.
His reaction tells you a lot about the sort of person he is.
It publicly emerges that it's because he'd made sexual overtures to another inmate, and he vehemently denied that, but that was his principal defence. This raping murderer who deeply cares that people might think he's gay, and that was his defence. No, not me. I'm not gay.
These days, Camilleri is a bit of a loner in jail, enjoying the relative comforts of prison life.
He's in his own place and he's living there, and he makes the most of what he can do each day. He had his own computer in his cell and had his own daily routine, and he kept to himself after that incident.
It doesn't sound like much, but the monotonous routine is one of the hardest things about prison life.
We walk around at roughly 6 a.m. I open the door, I have to say, guys, breakfast is here. At around 8 a.m., everyone gets let go, which means they're allowed to go into the yard. Between 8 to 11:30, 12, then you get locked back in for lunch. Then after 1:30, you go out again for 2 hours. At 3:30, you're locked in all the way through to the next morning at 6 a.m. And that's a repeat. That's your life for the next 10 years, if you're lucky. So that's what I'm saying, it's boring.
Absolutely dead boring. It's Groundhog Day every day. The same thing happens. The same musters, the same counts. All of these things happen religiously at the same time, day in, day out. So it's boring.
Prisoners nowadays live in relative comfort. The main challenge is psychological.
The prisoners, well, they get 3 meals a day. They've got a roof over their head and a place to sleep. So it's not too bad in that aspect, but the worst part is you're away from your family and friends. It's hard to explain how it is to somebody that's never been in there.
The actual punishment is being in jail because you aren't out in society, you're not with your family, you're not with your friends, you're not with your loved ones. That's the punishment. It doesn't have to be severe in jail.
But violence is never far away.
It's 99% chill, but that 1% of violence is the most extreme violence you can imagine. Stabbings, hangings, people getting their heads stomped on, like people getting their ears ripped off, bitten off, like it gets really bad really quick.
Jail can be brutal, it can be tough, it can be hard, it's dangerous. You're mixing with people who have got all sorts of different psychological issues. It's dangerous, it's life.
It's a horrible place. You're amongst the worst of the worst.
Some people are born with just that evil gene, and no amount of counselling is going to change it. The sort of people that I would categorise as evil in jail, it's in their DNA. I don't think it can be changed.
Coming up on Australia's most dangerous prisoners, the gangland matriarch turned murderer.
Judith Mann was born a crook, she was raised by crooks, she married crooks.
Some criminals possess a cunning intelligence. Judy Moran isn't one of them.
She was mean, she was vain, she was greedy, she was spiteful, and she totally overestimated her own value and her own importance and her own brain power.
A self-styled matriarch of Melbourne's underworld, she ordered the execution of her brother-in-law and was caught the very next day.
The police soon formed the view that she knew quite a lot about it. The police searched her place subsequently. They found a safe with handguns and a balaclava in it. So she wasn't a master criminal.
Sentenced to 26 years, she was for a time top dog at Melbourne's Dame Phyllis Frost Jail.
A movie-style plot is being played out in a maximum security women's prison. It involves a Melbourne gangland matriarch, Judy Moran, who's been accused of using fear and intimidation to rule her fellow inmates with an iron fist.
But now she cuts a lonely, embittered figure, plotting revenge in her cell.
I don't think she's got a conscience. I don't think she's especially intelligent, and I don't think she would have any capacity for remorse or self-analysis.
She struggled to adjust to the privations of jail because from a young age, she became accustomed to the finer things in life.
Judith Mann was born a crook, she was raised by crooks, she married crooks, and she lived a pretty good life on the proceeds of crime.
She was trying to pretend that she was the Maggie Tabro of the Melbourne criminal world. I mean, you know, she bunged on the special plum in the mouth voice. Oh, hello, how are you? And oh no, she thought she was the little Lillian Frank of Ascot Vale.
Her de facto husband Lewis and two sons, Mark and Jason, were big players in Melbourne's drug trade, and Judy seemed to enjoy the attention.
And that's the way it would have gone, except that the underworld war got in the way.
In 2000, gunmen shot her eldest son, Mark Moran, dead. Payback for a botched execution he and his brother attempted on Carl Williams.
Carl Williams spent his ill-gotten drug money hiring hitmen to go out and kill people that he didn't like. And Mark Moran was shot in the street outside his luxury home in Epsiode, which is one of the better suburbs out near Essendon.
Her other son, Jason, was gunned down 3 years later at a suburban football oval.
The children sitting closest to those two adults were splattered with blood and bone and brain matter, and he probably persuaded himself that, you know, no self-respecting crooks would shoot you if you had a heap of kids at the football. But he got it wrong. The Carl Williams' hitmen would certainly do that.
5 children in the back of the van targeted by the gunman were lucky to escape injury and were given on-the-spot counselling after witnessing the execution-style killings.
Why don't you admit that you murdered my both children? Why don't you admit it?
And the next year, Lewis Moran, her former de facto partner, was shot dead too. Judy played the role of grieving woman with gusto.
Anyone that has lost a child becomes a victim of crime.
Is that what you are?
My word, I'm a victim of crime.
You'd think losing every member of her family would have persuaded her to go clean.
And yet, all she could find from that was to hate her sole surviving relative, and that is Lewis's brother Tuppence, her real name Des.
Des Tuppence Moran was her brother-in-law. Since Lewis died, he'd been paying her a monthly allowance, but she thought it was too stingy, so she ordered his execution.
Good evening. Melbourne's notorious underworld war has reignited with the cold-blooded killing today of Des Moran, the 4th member of the family to be murdered. 2 gunmen shot him repeatedly in front of horrified lunchtime shoppers at a suburban deli.
One of the first on the scene was Judith, and she wailed and she carried on and she sobbed and said, "It should have been me, it should have been me." Those people watching her noted that she made a lot of noise, but there were no actual tears coming from her eyes. Not even crocodile tears, really.
Leave me alone.
She was screaming, "Oh, Desi, 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 Desi."
It all looked a bit too obvious to police that night. They followed Judy as she went for a drive in the same getaway car those witnesses had seen at the shooting.
She got out of it wearing gloves, because she's a master criminal, you know, gloves. And she took the gloves off and threw them into the bushes where the watching police retrieved them. And she started to walk home. She's tottering home, and the police pull up next to her and said, "Hey, Judy, do you want to ride?" And that's when she knew the game was up.
For someone with an ego as big as Judy's, prison life has been an adjustment. When she was first jailed, she complained that her prison cell was too cold and that she didn't have enough blankets.
Judy Moran is a complainer by nature. She has tickets on herself. She's a con. She thinks she can put it over people, and probably to some extent she can. She's used to manipulating people. She's done it all her life, and so she will not pass up any opportunity to get herself any small advantage, or that she thinks is an advantage inside.
Initially, Judy was housed in a cottage at Dame Phyllis Frost Jail. She could order groceries and cook.
The cabins just got the front door locked, front and back door locked at night, so you could move around. Then you've got a little dining area, kitchen, and a place where you can sit and watch telly. You've got a budget for each unit, and you order the meat, the vegetables, the fruit and whatnot from the kitchen.
But after a brawl broke out in a cottage, she was put into isolation. And in 2015, she took prison authorities to court to try and get back to her old digs.
Hearing via video link and wrapped in a large pink shawl, Moran shook her head as she was denied access to her old unit.
Prison authorities said she had an unhealthy influence over other inmates. Some complained they'd been threatened by her.
On the outside, she was the queen of the gangland war. Inside Victoria's maximum security women's prison, Judy Moran still rules the roost.
Kept isolated, she spends her days knitting and eating junk food. She reportedly put on 25 kilos and now relies on a wheelchair. Although Andrew Rule has his doubts about that one.
I'm not sure how much she needs that wheelchair. She probably does need it, but she certainly doesn't need it all the time. She was very keen on it during her court case because it was sort of part of her shtick at that stage. But it was known that she could get up out of it and totter across the room.
Prison life is a far cry from her heyday as a gangster's mole and colourful Melbourne identity.
She will die an embittered, poverty-stricken woman who's lost everything. Her story is really a morality tale for all those who think they should take on a life of crime.
Coming up, meet one of the country's most notorious child killers.
He was born evil. He's a nasty human being that will do anything to get what he wants at any given time.
If you recognise this man, it's because for years the unsolved disappearance of 13-year-old Daniel Morecambe gripped the country.
Tonight will allow you to see inside their investigation into Daniel Morecambe's abduction.
Brett Cowan, a serial child sex offender, murdered Daniel in 2003, a crime that took more than a decade to be solved.
He was born evil. He's a nasty human being that will do anything to get what he wants at any given time.
Cowan is serving a life sentence in Queensland's Woolston Correctional Centre. It's home to some of the country's worst sex offenders.
It's a pedophile prison, and it's a prison for protection. So you're in there with people that need protection because they can't either look after themselves in mainstream or they have committed offences that are more heinous.
There is hierarchical order in prisons, and depending on what you're charged with and what your crime is, where you slot on the hierarchy, pedophiles, or as rock spiders as they used to be called, were the lowest of the low. And they were always put on protection and kept out of the mainstream. They had to be, because they would have been attacked and were attacked. I saw it happen.
The threat of being thrown back into mainstream keeps most prisoners in protection well behaved.
He's in prison with people that require protection and that don't want to upset the apple cart. If they upset the apple cart inside prison, they'll then be transferred to mainstream. So they behave themselves to a certain point at any given time.
If it weren't for a bit of bad luck, Daniel Morecambe might still be alive. A few weeks before Christmas in 2003, he decided to catch a bus to a local mall. He wanted to get a haircut. But the bus he was supposed to catch had broken down. When a second bus drove past, it was too full to take him.
That driver went past, but did remember seeing a young boy standing at the bus stop waiting and trying to flag the bus down. So that was certainly the last member of the public to have seen Daniel.
By the time the next bus went by, just 3 minutes later, Daniel had disappeared, sparking a massive search.
Queensland police fear a teenager missing from his home on the Sunshine Coast may have been abducted.
It's getting desperate. We need him back. We want Daniel back.
Police staged a reenactment, hoping members of the public might have seen Daniel. They also went about tracking down registered sex offenders in the area, which is how Dennis Martin came face to face with Brett Cowan.
And we were just given folders, and each folder's consisted of pedophiles convicted and released in the area at that time, and it just happened to be that the bundle I received included Brett Peter Cowan.
Cowan was an obvious person to check. He'd been convicted of abducting and raping 2 young boys in the worst circumstances you could imagine.
Both were potentially to be murdered. That was his intention, because he said to the first one he will kill him. He put his hands around his neck and choked him. The second one, he's busted his eyeballs to make them bleed, he squeezed his throat that hard and he believed him to be dead and left him in the boot of the car.
Even before Cowan opened the door, Dennis was suspicious because sitting in the driveway was a white four-wheel drive.
Well, the white four-wheel drive was of importance to us because it was nominated by a witness statement that a white four-wheel drive with a snorkel was seen parked on the opposite side of the road where and when Daniel was there.
His suspicions only heightened when he spoke to Cowan.
We knocked on the door, explained who we were and what we were there for. He was very accommodating, he was very smooth, very swarmy.
Cowan said that on the morning of Daniel's disappearance, he had driven down the same highway to pick up some garden mulch, but his alibi left 45 minutes unaccounted for.
I said, "Did you see Daniel Morecambe?" He said, "No." I said, "You are a bullshitter and a liar." I said, "Because you like little boys, and I've got a witness statement to say that there was your vehicle or similar to your vehicle pulled up on the other side of the road, and are you telling me you didn't see him?" And on tape, he said to myself and my partner, "Well, I might have seen him." I said, "So now you've gone from not seeing him to seeing him. So we're now confirmed you're a liar and you're lying to me."
When Dennis and his partner walked away from Cowan's house, they were sure he would become the prime suspect.
I spoke with my partner and I said, "He is right for this, absolutely." I said, "He stinks of being a pedophile. He's got absolutely every trait to be a murderer, and he gave that off by being too cocky." That's what gave him up to me.
Dennis wanted the investigation to focus on Brett Cowan. Instead, the investigation focused on this car and a different paedophile.
They then blinkedly looked at him and nobody else and wouldn't suggest or take any suggestions that it could be anybody else.
At the Maroochydore police station, Daniel Morecambe has become an obsession. Police are appealing for anyone who's seen or knows someone with a vehicle like this to ring Crime Stoppers.
And he should have been caught in that 2-week period.
Coming up, the extraordinary police work that resulted in a confession.
I never got to molest him or anything like that. He panicked and I panicked.
Daniel Morecambe's disappearance in December 2003 gripped the nation.
Somebody's got him. Someone knows where he is. You can't just vanish into thin air. He's got to be somewhere.
But by 2010, the investigation had hit a dead end. An inquest was held, and suspects that police had ruled out were called to give evidence, including Brett Cowan.
He gave an alibi, obviously, that was inclusive of the alibi he provided to me, but he further advocated that he'd called in to his local drug dealer's home on the way home, but the people that he allocated as his drug dealers have come forward and said, no, that didn't occur. Clearly he didn't turn up that day. So that blew his theory.
With his alibi in tatters, Cowan was now a prime suspect. But police had no evidence. To get it, they turned to a risky investigative technique.
It was a covert operation, and it was called the Mr. Big Job.
Undercover police posing as criminals befriended Cowan. They told him they were in a gang and introduced him to their boss, Mr. Big.
Cowan believing that he's in with a group and that to go up this group he must start telling some truths so that if he has committed any further criminal activity that it can be covered up and or dismissed so that they don't or he doesn't cause a problem for the group.
Believing he was talking to the big boss of a crime gang, Cowan confessed to the undercover police officer.
There was a broken down bus. The sun bus, broken down, and then I seen Daniel.
He will never say what really happened because he's that type of person. But what he has admitted to is that he picked him up, drove him to an isolated area in the pine forests out the back of Beerwah, attempted to molest him, had an altercation with Daniel.
I never got to molest him or anything like that. He panicked and I panicked and grabbed him around the throat, and before I knew it, he was dead.
Police finally had their confession, but they still needed to find Daniel's body.
All right, you're under arrest for the murder of Daniel Morecambe.
Yep, cool. I'm under arrest for Daniel Morecame's murder.
Now under arrest, Cowan takes them to the scene of the crime.
He's taken him to the side of a river and placed his body in the river, and that was the last he saw of him.
He was finally convicted in 2014. In prison, he is a bash-on-sight target.
Daniel Morecambe's killer has been attacked by another prisoner. Brett Cowan was stabbed in the neck and the ears.
In 2017, he received what prisoners call a hot watering.
Daniel Morecambe's killer is being treated in hospital after a fellow inmate scalded him with boiling water in jail.
It's long been said that Daniel Morecambe's killer, Brett Peter Cowan, would be a marked man inside prison. Well, this morning, confirmation.
His attacker had been planning it for a month. He later told court that Cowan had it coming.
I didn't want to kill him or nothing. I just wanted him to feel the pain like Daniel Morecambe would have felt.
These people want to big note themselves. These people want to say, oh, I did this, I did that. If they were dead set serious, the man would be dead.
Because of the attacks, Cowan has spent long periods of time in isolation. But Dennis Martin says life in prison is comfortable. Too comfortable.
His life in jail will be of reasonable comfort, unfortunately. He will have TV access, he will have library access, he will most likely be working, earning monies, and it won't be of great hardship to him, except that he will not be able to have access to his target group when his urges commence.
Cowan is permanently disfigured from the hot watering, yet still isn't sorry for his crimes.
Brett Peter Cowan doesn't feel remorse. He has only one thing in his mind, his self-preservation and gaining his urges. So if he's talking, he's lying. It's as simple as that. That's Brett Peter Cowan. He couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it, and he will concoct a story to get a benefit of anything that he would like. That's how he lives, and that's how he's always lived.
Coming up, the harsh prison conditions once endured by Australia's most dangerous prisoners.
So from early morning until the evening, these prisoners are kept in what can only be described as open cages.
But I've had acid thrown in my eyes, I've had my ribs broken, I've had my eyes bunged up, my lips split, my nose broken through that many times. It's not funny.
Across Australia, there are more than 40,000 prisoners detained right now. Prison isn't easy, but it's a far cry from jails of the past.
I still remember the first time I went into prison as a detective. The thing that you notice when you first walk into prison, you can actually hear the doors clang shut behind you. You can hear the key turn. You think, it's chilling. There's the smell, which is pervasive. It's sort of unwashed humans and a bit of fear mixed in a few other bits and pieces.
In 1985, Channel 7 cameras were allowed inside Long Bay Prison for an unprecedented and unflinching look at jail life for Australia's most dangerous prisoners. They had full and unfettered access.
If you're a prison informer, a child molester, rapist, young and good-looking, or just simply can't survive in the main jail, this is where you come to serve your time. It's called protection. These prisoners are kept in what can only be described as open cages, exposed to all weather. Why are you out here?
I'm in for child abuse.
So you're a prisoner who's really disliked you?
I'm not liked by no one, that's correct. But I've had acid thrown in my eyes, I've had my ribs broken, I've had my eyes bunged up, my lips split, my nose broken through that many times. It's not funny.
Why are you in here?
Just for car stealing.
But why are you in protection?
Because I'm a young bloke, I got bashed out in the main, and I got bashed in here. And I can't go back out now. I'm trying to get to Parramatta and they won't send me there. Because he's a sex object to a lot of older prisoners.
The prisoners were candid about life inside.
Over the years, don't blink twice now. You can go sit over there and have a crap with 30 blokes around. It's nothing.
Now, after 7.5 years, I've had a few homosexual relationships whilst being inside. But I think that's another thing that when you're on the outside, you don't think about homosexuality. Inside, most of the time it's a relief.
Back then, drugs and booze were freely available.
Home brews are everywhere in jail. Heroin can be bought in jail too.
The only ingredients you use for making home brew is just oranges, sugar, and Vegemite sachets. You leave it down for 4 days just and you if get you want. Shut up. 4 days if you want a mild brew. If you want just pure alcohol, leave it down for 7 days. If I went in the outside and I started putting my home brews down, I think I'd put the paint stripper firm out of business. Yeah. Oh, it just strips the lining out of your guts.
What makes someone rape or murder? Dennis Martin has locked up countless criminals. He thinks some people are just born evil, like Brett Cowan.
It's my belief, and after I've dealt with Cowan for a fair bit, that he was naturally born that way. He's just a bad person. He had a reasonably good upbringing. He had a strict upbringing, which is not a bad thing. So there was nothing there to suggest that nurture was the cause of this course of action. He has shown that he doesn't want to be rehabilitated, and if he's free, he will commit further offences. He does not care about anybody else but himself.
Leslie Camilleri had one of the worst upbringings imaginable and displayed evil from a young age.
Leslie Camilleri will die in jail, and the judge certainly made sure of that. He found that somebody whose crimes were beyond redemption and that he was beyond rehabilitation, and that is very obvious from the person he was from a very, very young age. This, it turns out, was an animal that needed to be in a cage for the rest of his life for the benefit of society. And that is the only sad legacy from Nicole and Lauren, at least, that their deaths have allowed this monster to be caged for the rest of his life.
Then there's Judy Moran. She chose the criminal life and relished her place in it.
Judith Moran, as much as any of them, is an illustration of why it's no life, the criminal life. She lost everything to crime. You know, years ago, she spent years using her two boys who were violent. Jason was probably a psychopath. They were violent, they were armed, they were tough, they were standovers, and she would use them like big dogs to frighten other people because she could sool her boys onto other people. And then in the end, of course, if you live by the gun, you die by the gun.
And so they'll rot in prison, living the rest of their days with crushing monotony and the risk of violence. Justice is served.